My name is Victoria Findlay Wolfe and I'm a licensed designer with Sizzix. Today we are doing the curved braid. I love curves. If you haven't seen my double wedding rings, this will give you a good clue why this die really excites me. We have a lot of fun options that work with this quilt. It's an interesting shape, it's unique, it's something that I think you're going to have a lot of fun with. So let's take a look. The die is going to fit on the Big Shot, the Big Shot Plus, and the Big Shot Pro, so you have a lot of versatility on the machines that you're using. I'm going to lay my fabrics up. You can lay up to 8 layers at a time on your die. Put my cutting pad below and on top. Today we're using the Big Shot Plus machine. So we have some options in the way that we lay these pieces out. You're going to sew your little curves together and make these long vertical rows, but you have the choice where you could match up colors to kind of give this scallop sort of effect, or we could look at doing something that's a little bit different. And you can see how if you're just putting a whole bunch of scraps on top of this die, the kind of plethora of colors that you're going to get. You can also then think about, instead of putting all the rows to going opposite directions, that's one thing to notice on the die. If you're going to want to lay out this way, you're going to want mirror, so you're going to put right sides together of your fabric so that you're getting the mirror image of them. Plus, besides the fact that you can do that, you could also play with the direction in which the rows go. So this time, I could flip it so that some of the curves are going to the up and some of the curves are going down, which are going to give you a nice wave effect. Now, no matter which way you do it, you are getting kind of a wave look. So let's talk about the quilt that's hanging behind me. So here, as I just showed you on the table, where I've used mirror images of the piece, I've used a light fabric and a dark fabric to sort of give this patchwork sort of effect. Here I've gone and I've used 2 fabrics of the same to give this sort of scallop effect going across the bottom. So either way, you're kind of always getting a water sort of effect. I like that wave look that you can get with these. And if you flip and do those the opposite direction, now you're gonna, and you play with some ombre fabrics or fabrics, laying out your fabrics to give that ombre effect, things are gonna go from light to dark. You get this very modern graphic waves happens, and that goes on a diagonal this time, instead of the vertical and horizontal effect of the other layout. But let's look at how we're going to sew those pieces together. You'll notice on these pieces that there are, when you cut them out, little notches that mark your center point on the shape. So if I want to sew this into place, I can very easily line up my center mark, and I'm going to put a pin in there to hold that. And then I can come around here to the side. Because of the dog ears already in place, I know exactly where I'm going to line up the rest of my curve. And I'm going to pin that. And then I'm going to come around to the end of this, where it looks very narrow, but that's also dog-eared, which is going to lay perfect with the raw edge of my fabric on this side. And I'm going to put a pin in there. So it's very easy to tell where you need to line up, where you're starting and stopping on your sewing. A good thing to do then, after you've pinned it, is to check. Did I pin it accurately? Can I sew from the beginning of my fabric to the next pin and the fabric will lay in there perfectly? That's definitely going to fit. And the same thing here. So sewing my 1/4 inch seam from the beginning all the way to the end, it's not really much of a curve anymore, which is nice. So there's no reason to be afraid of sewing your curves together. So I like to pay attention to my hand placement when I'm sewing curves. I'm going to start by setting my needle in the fabric and taking a couple stitches. Then I can take out my first pin. So then my right hand is going to go to that middle pin, and I'm just going to make sure that my raw edges of my top fabric and my bottom fabric are laying perfectly together. Right now I can see that I can sew from right where my needle is all the way to that first pin. When I get to the pin, I'm going to take that out. Again, I'm going to readjust my hand position. My right hand is going to go to that next pin. I'm holding the bottom layer of my fabric flat. Because of the bias on the top piece of my fabric, if I'm holding that bottom piece flat, that's what's going to allow that extra bias into the top layer of your fabric. So again, now that I can see I'm holding that bottom layer flat, I can sew all the way through to the end of my block, and I don't have any problem with pleating or extra fabric. I don't have to stretch anything. It's just going to fit in there beautifully. So I've sewn my curve, which was very easy to do. I've pressed my seam. I'm pressing it, this one to the top, to the outside, so that this piece of fabric is going to lay nice and flat. And then I'm going to just continue to add my sections of the curved braid all the way to whatever length I want to make them, which means I'm going to have then just this long straight edge. For instance, if we were just looking at this, I would have very long straight edges that I'm going to then sew together and make my quilt. So it's a fun, versatile die, and you'll have a lot of fun using it.